Hi, and welcome to another episode of Cultivate. Today, we have the rock star of business media, George Jage. George, thank you so much for taking up our offer to come on the show today.
Oh, thanks, Jen. I appreciate the accolades as a rock star. I don't have any groupies though, so I don't know if I truly qualify as a rock star, but I'll take it.
Oh, I'm a groupie. Are you kidding?
Okay, well then I've got one groupie.
I think you have many more. You just don't know about it. So let's talk about your background in business media and how you got started in the cannabis industry.
Sure. I got into the business media space back out of college, actually. And like most people back in, I'd say the early, the 80s and 90s, a lot of people that started creating trade shows and got into the business media space really kind of did it as a side door or kind of an accidental stumble into the space. My dad actually had a apparel liquidation business. He was facing some pretty tough business challenges. I came on board, and we actually, more out of necessity than anything else, created the first trade show for the off-price apparel industry. This is where the TJ Maxx's and the Marshalls would come to get their shows, and the apparel liquidators would sell sometimes 70 to 80% of their annual revenues at our events.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so we grew that show from about 20 exhibitors in a hotel room to doing over 4 shows a year. At one point, I did a show in a 185,000 square foot tent structure in Nevada.
Wow.
Megawatts of generated power and 2,800 tons of air conditioning. And we'll talk about how environmentally unfriendly that was compared to what we're doing today. For
sure. So, and then how did you get into cannabis specifically? Were you seeking that out or?
Not really, not actively. Actually, following the off-price show, I had been involved with a couple other events, including building and owning World Tea Media, launching an event called Healthy Beverage Expo. And I was kind of wrapping up that business after I sold it to F&W Media. I was approached by a gentleman who called me up and was a friend of a friend and said, "Hey, George, let's start a pot show." And I said, that just wasn't part of my life at that moment. I think like most people, I had an herbal distribution business when I was younger. And kind of post college, I just, didn't have access or really, have it readily available because it was illegal, et cetera. So anyways, that conversation ended up stumbling into Ann and Cassandra from MJBiz reaching out to me and asking me to come on board to run their business. They had a small publication. They were doing very, kind of basic events, 20 tabletops at a racetrack in Seattle. And they really needed somebody that could really help them understand the event space and scale their business. So, I was able to take, that company over 3 years to over 100,000 net square feet, get the event into the convention center in Las Vegas. I'm very proud of my work there and what I was able to kind of set up and create as a legacy for the industry. And my primary goal was to create a must-attend event, which it became.
Absolutely, it did. And George, I was a speaker at the first one. I spoke at several. And I think you started in 14, right?
Yep. So that was the first year the event was held in Las Vegas. And I think what people didn't understand is in the cannabis space, at that time, a lot of the people coming into the industry were, severe risk takers, right? And people that were really willing to risk life and limb, which could be translated into civil asset forfeiture or jail time. And so, the people, it wasn't, I don't want to say I hate when people kind of say, well, the cannabis industry is unprofessional. I am in favor of, having that type of entrepreneurial spirit that, has to run things by the seat of their pants sometimes, but can scale into a professional business. But nobody had seen what a true trade show could be for the industry. So, we were able to put in some policies that really kind of, created a very professional environment for the industry. And I think people were kind of blown away saying, wow, this is real now. This is a legitimate industry. We've got a trade show that has booths and there's attendees and there's people doing business.
They have clothes on.
What's that?
I said, and they have clothes on because the very first conference, not MJBiz, but yeah, the women were not wearing enough clothes.
Yeah, and listen, we did the event at a casino in Las Vegas. Gaming licenses are probably one of the most regulated licenses in the country. Obviously, they have policies around drug use on properties around that. So we had to have a lot of signs up that said that, you know, there's no cannabis use at the event. And a lot of the people that came into the industry early were very hardcore advocates for, you know, open cannabis use. So it's kind of, you know, badge of honor to spark up a joint in an inappropriate place, because it's about planting that flag. And, you know, I'm there, and certainly there was a few more tie-dyes and dreadlocks and things going on. I'm standing there watching this guy in the registration line just spark up a joint. I'm like, listen, I don't care if you smoke, like, I'm all for it, but, you know, have some discretion, because what happens is if the hotel security sees you doing that, they're going to exit you from the property, probably hand you over to law enforcement, and you'll be blacklisted from Caesars properties for life.
Well, and it just shows bad on the industry. Go somewhere else. I mean, very inappropriate, for sure. Well, I remember we were all so excited that it was going to Vegas. I mean, all of us. How hard was it to get on with the Rio? I mean, how many hotels did you talk to?
Well, you know, and you know, necessity is kind of the mother of invention. You know, Las Vegas and those businesses have their ups and downs too. And, you know, Caesars Entertainment was somewhat marginally stepping into bankruptcy at that time. I mean, they needed revenues. The hotel we went to, the Rio, is off strip, so they're certainly looking for revenue opportunities. I mean, I was spending over $1 million in food and beverage at that event in 2016, which is a huge piece of revenue for them. It was the biggest piece of revenue that they had at their hotel for the entire year.
Wow, really? They loved us, right? And then they made you sign a 3-year, correct? Was it a 3-year commitment?
Well, when I came on board, the company had already started exploring, you know, venues in Las Vegas. There was a couple of really subpar. I had lived in Vegas for 15 years. Like I said, I've been doing trade shows for, you know, now coming on 30 years. You know, there was a lot of work I had to do to really perfect the contract and get a longevity for it. The business at that time, because it was so new, was operating on kind of a 3-month strategic plan. And so I was able to kind of really scale in and create a 3-year rolling plan for venues and get the event into, and really create a 5-year forecast for the business, because I knew where it could go. Certainly dependent on some of the federal legalization issues, and state legalization issues. So there was just a lot of fortunate timing events as far as that legalization goes for MJBiz.
And is it true that you grew them 2,600% in 3 years? Somebody else told me that.
Yeah, I thought I was doing a pretty good job before I left.
I would say so. I mean,
we'll leave it at that. I've got a tremendous amount of respect for Chris Walsh. He was the only full-time employee for the brand when I came on board. You know, to be the kind of the media executive side of the business and have somebody that is that exceptional of a business journalist and business editor and can really build community through content was an incredible asset for me to be able to leverage that business and grow it that fast.
You left there and you went to Dope Magazine.
Yep. So I was kind of in a little bit of a contract and employment dispute with MJBiz. So I've always kind of had this curiosity and certainly look for opportunities that are challenging. Like, I like to find, you know, kind of things that people would say you can't do or nobody's ever tried to do before, or something that's going to challenge me personally. And, you know, I had been building business media for some time, and I thought, well, you know, if I could get into consumer media, it would certainly, you know, I think create some new opportunities, some new challenges, and hopefully help me grow professionally and personally. And I think Dope had a phenomenal brand and business at the time. I mean, you know, I'm sure you know some of the founders, Dave Tran and others over there. I mean, the amount of passion and, you know, just sincerity and kind of, you know, authenticity of who Dave was as kind of the lead brand ambassador over there is phenomenal. They grew too fast. Consumer media is really tough to monetize. There was, you know, a little bit of that kind of scope creep that entrepreneurs in the early stages of cannabis have. I was like, oh, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this. And yeah. I actually have a shirt that says Squirrel Whisperer. I should have worn for today's interview.
Oh my God, you should have. I need one of those.
But listen, I mean, those guys have, I just have a tremendous amount of admiration for the amount of hustle they have. And the investors had committed a lot of capital. The business was not profitable. They were looking for somebody that could kind of be a good bridge between, you know, understanding the needs of the investors and also really kind of harnessing that passion of the founders. But, you know, it was a tough time. And, you know, we got to a point where, you know, capital markets were starting to get a little bit tight. It was hard to raise money against a business that hadn't shown profitability after, you know, an extended period of time. So getting another investor to jump in and say, hey, look, we've done this, but we haven't made any money yet is a really hard pitch.
Yeah.
So we found a really good solution. We moved forward to kind of recapitalize the business by, you know, getting this acquired by a publicly traded company that I will not name. But, you know, we went through a PCAOB audit. You know, for a small enterprise like Dope, you know, having to get SEC compliant, you know, financials was challenging and incredibly expensive. We got there, the company that was going to buy us, you know, not uncommon in the cannabis industry, tried to retrade us. And, you know, Adam Levine had expressed interest early on as well. And, you know, certainly High Times is the most iconic, you know, consumer media brand for the cannabis space. It was our best option to move forward with him at the time. And I would have liked to have seen things, you know, develop and kind of transition better, but, you know, I did what I could do and had to step away.
Yeah, well, you know, unfortunately, I don't think they look to the future too much. And I think, you know, did they think that they bought 2 magazines and now, I mean, let's face it, High Times, at least for me back in the day, was to see big grows. I mean, it was about the black market and you know, the secrecy or whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's what High Times was known for. So it was very interesting. And now, of course, they've been through 3 CEOs. And I'm having a hard time with, you know, they took a CEO from what? American Eagle, Victoria's Secret, and now they're getting in the retail game. You know, if you've never done retail in cannabis, you probably should have somebody that knows how to do it.
Well, 2 things there. First of all, the CEO position at High Times has become the professor of dark arts position, right? Like there's just nobody that seems to survive that very long. But this is where I think, you know, what really excited me about Dope is that, you know, High Times and, you know, no disrespect to what the brand is because it's been around for, you know, 30 or 40 years now. And it was a really strong voice for cannabis use at a time when it was illegal.
Yeah.
It did have that stigma of a really kind of having an audience of, you know, 18 to 28-year-old white men that were, you know, smoking marijuana and probably slightly misogynistic and, or, you know, and just, it wasn't a good brand, you know, of what the cannabis industry should become. And Dope and what they kind of really envisioned and Dope was like, oh, well, why would you call it Dope? And it stood for defend your plant everywhere, right? It stood for defend your patients everywhere. It stood for defend your planet everywhere. And there was a really strong ethos behind that was about compassion and about doing good. It was about, you know, normalizing the cannabis consumer experience and relating it to technology and to fashion and to art and to science. And like I said, I think that they had a great vision for the business. You know, it's just not an easy model to get there. And so I think everybody would have liked to have seen, you know, Dope kind of become that High Times 2.0, but at some point you gotta take a look around and say, how do we get out of this, or how do we move this forward? And
so it's interesting because that was me. I'm like, oh my God, we're trying to get rid of the stigma, and then a magazine comes out that's dope. You know, I was so upset, and then I found that out, and I'm like, wow, that's wonderful. I just wish they would have, you know, advertise that more, just because at that time we were fighting so hard to get rid of this.
Yeah. And certainly that name like is very appealing to kind of the and kind of fits in with the kind of the hip hop and kind of
pop culture,
you know, urban culture of the times. And But that was one of the big challenges that I think I really struggled with, is like, how do we make this something that, we can reach a broader audience than people that are already consuming cannabis, right? And get somebody who is a potential, cannabis user to understand, like, hey, put down the Chardonnay and have some weed. It's safer. It's better for you. It's
Not be hungover.
Yeah, it's more fun.
More fun.
More fun.
So the biggest thing about expos now, of course, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, if you will, has started an expo or a convention or whatever you want to call it. I've been to many. I will not go to most of them again. But they're all suppliers. They're all ancillary businesses. It is not your licensed operators anymore. Last MJBiz, there was over 30,000 people. How many booths? I don't know. But you couldn't find anything. And it was literally lights, soil, And so it's losing value in that case. And now a lot of people go just to see people, just to see your California, for me, the other states, my friends there and such. So that leads us to now MJ Unpacked, your new venture. Tell us how that's going to be different.
Sure. That's a great segue, by the way. So, this is really kind of core to our thesis. And listen, I mean, leaving MJBiz, I always saw that there was a bigger opportunity that I wanted to move the business into. This was part of the kind of, I think, misalignment of where I was taking the business with the owners, wishes. But, these big pan industry shows, not just MJ BizCon, but others, they can't operate a national trade show for cannabis brands and retailers because everything is state regulatory fenced. So if you look at any industry, any consumer packaged goods industry, and taking the assumption that we are a consumer packaged goods industry or consumer products good industry, the most important assets in that space are ones that really deliver that connective value to brands and retailers. And those big pan industry shows become exceptionally dilutive for anybody who's attending them. I mean, like, how do you find the people that you want to meet with that are new people and really make those valuable connections when only 5% of the people there are really relevant to you? Or maybe 10% of the content is valuable to you and your specific needs, both personally, professionally, and from a corporate standpoint. So, looking at, having the experience of 30 years in the space and business media, I saw a huge opportunity, and it was something that Patrick Ray over at Canopy Boulder and I have been talking about for years, that there needs to be a platform and a trade show and resources that are directly targeting the brands and the retailers. I mean, this is the last kind of exchange and partnership in the industry on the business side before we reach the consumer. And, the retailers have to be able to create a welcoming and a professional and a engaging retail experience to get new consumers in the door. Brands have to create transparency and product consistency and product safety to get those consumers to try their products and understand that they're not buying a gummy, they're buying a psychedelic, or not a psychedelic, but a psychotropic experience, right? Well, yep. Sometime in the future, there'll be psychedelic experiences for sale, right? That's a big purchase for a consumer. Like, you don't know what this is going to do for you until you try it. So how does that brand really communicate that to the consumer and make them want to try their product, and then know that they can come back, buy that same product, and have a very similar experience with something that is interacting with your endocannabinoid system and your body's physiology. So you might have different experiences from time to time. But there's these big macro industry issues that are really central to the brands and the retailers. And, I think Hall of Flowers has done a great job out in California, really creating a platform for brands and retailers to interchange information. We wanted to take a different approach and really take a top-down approach of engaging with the brand and retail executives exclusively. And so, to attend our events, you have to have the title of manager above and, work for a operating licensed cannabis brand or cannabis retail outlet. Now, when I say brands, this isn't like, Gavita, who's got a brand of light bulbs. This is brands like Wana Brands and Curaleaf or the Select Oil that they own. And, Keef Cola and Chiba Chews and some of those great brands that exhibited with us in the first show in Colorado. And certainly cultivators to some extent in some markets have their own brands, right? They're actually producing pre-rolls. They've got, a product in a jar that is, their strain. And those are brands too.
Yep. It'll become more branding your cannabis flower. Yes. It's picking up more and more. And I think the smaller shorty pre-rolls are going to become very popular.
The blockers.
Because everybody was already worried about sharing joints, and now, so whoever's not making those are missing the boat.
I never saw the dog walkers until I saw you in Colorado. Those are fantastic. I love those.
The dog walkers. Yeah, they're wonderful.
Like, what great marketing to say, this is calling them dog walkers. Like, this is the perfect size joint for you to go walk your dog with after dinner or before dinner or whatever you want to do it. I think that's great marketing. It's great branding. It's great strategy.
So let's talk about your event. Well, of course, now, George, I'm so impressed. You had a business model and then COVID came and you had 6 weeks to pivot this business.
Yeah. Little known fact, I have a degree in microbiology, so I kind of understand. Yeah.
So do I. That is hilarious. Anyway, okay.
We can have a long conversation about gram-negative bacterial strains later.
Yes,
but it's been very intense, period. And we had formed the business in September with some pre-seed capital from Canopy Boulder. I kind of was somewhat hall passed in their program where I wasn't required to be in the Colorado, office and going through and doing 15 pitches a day as Patrick grills you and drills you into being the best pitcher ever. And he does a great job with that. But I was able to engage in the program, and then, I live up in Seattle and, kind of telecommute into the program a couple times a week. But we were able to go out and raise capital from a group of investors that I had known for years in the cannabis space, as well as some investors in some of my past businesses that I made a good return for that were willing to jump in on this. We completely closed our seed round in February. It's only the second company in Canopy Boulder's history that ever closed a round before the program ended. Keegan over at work was the first. If I'm in a esteemed company like that, I consider myself honored. So we got funded, and we were really, ready to literally jump off the diving board into the deep end of the pool at the end of February, early March, when everything started kind of emerging, and the COVID was more of a concern at that point. It wasn't like they weren't even sure if they wanted to call it a pandemic. And I knew that this was going to have a significant impact on trade show attendance and people's ability to attend events. So we were able to not have to jump in the pool, dry off. I mean, there's a lot of other events out there that, were scheduled, and they're like, we're not giving you your money back. I don't think that's a fair way of handling it, but I know that those event organizers have businesses to run, and they've probably invested some of that money into planning the event. But we weren't in that position, so we were able to immediately go and research, over 30 different virtual event platforms and reposition our event so that we could go out to market and launch the first virtual trade show for the cannabis industry.
I was lucky enough to be involved, George.
Thank you.
I felt grateful to be a part of it and work closely with you. But when you showed me that, because, in my head, I'm thinking webinar, blah, blah, blah. When you showed me the platform, I was like, it was amazing. I'm like, this is fantastic. And, let's talk about some of the other benefits. I think you touched on one earlier, which is the environment.
Sure. And listen, when we started looking at these platforms and I saw everybody was scrambling to kind of position themselves digitally, some of the other media companies and events and even businesses. And there was this massive kind of flood of webinars that were being out there. And I think that there's a great opportunity for content and knowledge sharing with that, but it's a monolinear platform. Like, it's one speaking to many. There's no engagement. And when you look at the kind of the core values of what really creates a return on objectives, a return on investment, and a return on experience at a trade show. It's that ability to interact with the other attendees there. You're not going there because of the brand. You're going there because you want to see new products, you want to build your network, you want to, create lead generation.
And
so
maybe
those were our
in that market,
And so those were our primary objectives of how do we create that. And so we looked at a lot of platforms, and the one that we chose, really provided a robust kind of service capability to create customization for our exhibitors in their booths and be able to, put an avatar of their staff in there, right? We put some of our advisory board members in our lobby, and, it just creates familiarity, and psychologically that's really important. We're kind of doing something we haven't done before. There's other layers of that we'll be rolling out in future events that I think will separate us even further from the competition, because the technology itself is out there. Like, it's not defensible. I see some of the other event organizers starting to roll out their virtual event strategies, and I wish them success. It's hard. I will tell them it's hard. It's about creating that engagement. And I think I even talked to you one day during the event, and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And you're like, "Oh my God, this is so fun. I've got 13 conversations going on right now."
Yeah. In the chat.
Yeah. And so having that chat functionality where you can go and look at every other attendee that's in the space, you can see their title, you can see their company, and you can click a button and start a chat with them. And it's text-based. Like, people are like, "Oh, you should have video." I'm like, "No, I don't want to have video." Nobody wants to Zoom any more than they already are. And you get to the point, you can create a connection, you can exchange information and move on. And then take that conversation to a Zoom chat to further develop it, right? The network, this is about grabbing business cards and meeting new people and following up on them. But you talk about, like, the efficiency of this, and this is where I've really fallen in love with the virtual event platform. And listen, I've been doing events for 30 years. I love bringing people together and seeing that magic of what happens when you bring people that are passionate about a specific topic, a specific industry, a specific profession. It's really magical. But, with the virtual event platform, from an environmental standpoint, we're limited. 90% of the carbon footprint from events is people traveling to that event. That's gone. And then probably 9% of that remaining 10% is also gone. I'm not running fork trucks that are burning propane, that are moving stuff around on the floor. Garbage. Last year, the 60 million attendees attended trade shows and generated 600,000 tons of trash. That's 20 pounds of trash per person per event. That's gone.
Oh my God. And I never thought about that aspect of events ever. You don't think about that.
I was on the board for a guy that had a really great business model, and I helped him out when he was in his early stage. Zach Delbex, that was creating a Repurpose America, and what he was doing was really cool. He was taking, like, banners, these vinyl banners that are going to end up in a landfill that have somebody's information on it. He was taking these banners, he was kind of cleaning them up so that it wouldn't say, Sega or some company or Sony or something on it. He was taking these, he was creating shade shelters for playgrounds in and around Las Vegas, where temperatures can reach 120 degrees in the summer.
In Spain, they did that. I went to Spannabis and I went into a store and they turned it into purses, bags.
Yep.
It was really cool. It was really cool.
He was doing bags as well. So he was creating attendee bags from, recycled, repurposed vinyl banners.
Yeah, never thought about that.
Holders with them.
And some of those banners, oh my God, they're gigantic. And then talk about, like you said, the cooling system, running all the food and just the whole thing that I'd never thought about,
That's the financial efficiency of this too, right? So, for our exhibitors that are coming to a show, I mean, they would typically, the cost of the booth is usually only 20% of their overall cost. So, you pay for a $6,000 booth in Las Vegas, your costs are really around $30,000. You got to build a booth, you got to ship it out to Vegas, you got entertainment, you got your printed brochures that are going to end up in a garbage can and contributing to that 20 pounds of waste per person. We eliminate all of those costs, and the food and beverage. Yes, I mean, that impacts jobs, on one hand, but listen, by eliminating all that stuff, like we can deliver a booth experience for a brand for 98% less than you would to spend on a booth in Las Vegas, and deliver that for $500 because my cost structure has massively changed.
Right.
And I'm not creating all that waste.
No,
So, people that are
Right.
out there creating these virtual events that are trying to charge, normal event prices of $5,000 or more, I think are really being disingenuous and kind of, be honest, greedy.
They're going to have a really upset people once they realize how that goes. What I loved about it, the booth experience, is the person was there. You could engage immediately. They would greet you, but there was also the information, so you could download price sheets and everything. And again, on your computer. Yep. So, but you also had some other cool things, that you had a contest. So hoping people visit and, make sure that they took advantage of everything, that created points for them, which I thought was really cool. Yep. Another way to get people involved. And then the fact that you partnered with BDS to really take the data and drill it down to let people know how to use it, because it's great you have a bunch of data, but if you don't know what it means and how to wind that down to create more revenue for yourself, it's wasted. Yeah,
absolutely. So, as to BDS, BDSA, as they've rebranded recently, they are bar none the most reliable source of market intelligence in this industry. This is a conversation when I started this conversation with Patrick, last fall. The first thing I did is I went and met with Roy Bingham, founder of, and Liz Stahura. I met with them to talk to them about my vision for this. And they're like, this is something we've always wanted to do, but don't have the resources to do. And so they came in not only as a lead investor for my business, and this is the first time they've ever invested into a business outside of their own, but also as a strategic partner. And so we have them delivering a keynote, data-driven keynote session. And this is the first time they have ever gone in and presented what the top 5 brands are per category, and shared that data with on a stage. People loved it. The chatter around it was phenomenal.
Absolutely. That was one of the big values. And then you had, top of the line speakers, which always makes a difference. Whenever I was looking at a show, I always looked at the speakers first, because that tells you how valuable the show is going to be.
Listen, there's tons of talking heads, but we're approaching this with a very, kind of pure play. I mean, one is, I've run enough media companies, and we do not have a pay for play, stage. I see a lot of the less experienced organizers go out and sell a sponsorship and give that sponsor an opportunity to speak. We do have a place where the sponsors can have a platform, but that's separate, and it's very clearly labeled as sponsor-led roundtables, so that those sponsors can have an opportunity to, communicate their value proposition and their channel expertise, but it's separate from our kind of editorial content and create that separation of church and state. And there's a lot of speakers out there that are, I think, probably overexposed, have spoken at too many events, but there's ones that speak at a lot of events that are incredibly valuable. Sure. I think we did a good job on this first event. Like I said, we learned a lot. There was over 20,000 pieces of content downloaded and viewed in the event environment. We had close to 500 attendees register for the event. Over 80% of them actually engaged in the live hours that we were doing the event. And I think it was like 70% of them were in the event for more than 2 hours a day. So, we really had great engagement on this, right? Some of the things that we're going to be rolling out for our California event are going to be phenomenal to really improve that engagement and that interactivity between the attendees and provide a lot more value.
Well, I loved, and you said it earlier, the transparency of it, okay? You have the attendee list. It's not like it's a secret. You can see how many people are attending, who's coming to your booth, who's downloading. And that's very important because at these other expos, you really don't know. I mean, you're just kind of blindly walking around. You also had 2 exhibit halls. So one were the brands and one were just a handful, right? Handful of certain suppliers.
Yeah. That was really the only way that a supplier could be engaged in our platform. So, you know, of the attendees that came to the show, 40% of them were attendees that were buyers for retail operations. Of that 40%, you know, 30% of them were C-level executives and 30% of them were either purchasing managers or store managers that had purchasing authority. So, you know, we want to see that percentage go up to 60, 70% for our next show. We're certainly hopeful for that. But we did want to have a small amount of suppliers in the industry. What we don't want to be is this big pan industry show that is an endless sea of lighting and packaging and extraction equipment. Like there's a place for that. There's events for that. We don't need,
So this magazine, look at how thin it is, right? All grow, all soil, all lights, all of it. There's not one.
And that's where the money is. That's why these organizers have gone in that direction instead of, you know, that's where the money is, because all of those, there's about a 10-to-1 ratio of ancillary product services and technology companies to actual license holding companies in the industry. So there's 10 people that are trying to sell each one of those people every day. And the retailers and the brands are exhausted. They have lines of defense to protect them against that. And if they go to one of these big pan industry shows, they want to hide. They want to go incognito because, you know, they're getting mugged like physically and emotionally, like by walking around the hall, because they're probably outnumbered 500 or 1,000 to 1 at some of these shows. So, but talking about that going back to that efficiency thing and talking about how you could really just have that visibility to see who's there. Like you can pull up that attendee list and you can see exactly who the person is and what the company is with and engage with them very directly. It's like you don't have to hope to bump into them. Now, for the exhibitors in the booth, like they can see that, like who is in their booth. They get a little doorbell chime that somebody new's in their booth. New is in their booth, not news is in their booth.
There's news too.
Yeah. But they get to see that person. Like, and if you compare that to a live trade show experience, like people come into your booth, you don't know who they are. You've got to have that awkward moment and you're looking down at their chest and their badge might be turned around and blocked by business cards. And then you get to see, well, that's a person I really don't have time to talk to, and it's not really part of my target audience. And so I have to have this awkward exchange and try to get rid of them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't want their badge scanned. And what I found is at one of the MJBiz, when you scan, wouldn't even have a first name or a phone number. So, you know, you're taking this opportunity, buying scanners, and then you get the data back and you're like, well, hold on a second. It barely, you know, they should make the fields mandatory. I mean, that's the whole point of creating leads.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And listen, this is why this is core to our philosophy that we believe that having a show that actually qualifies their attendees, and no other show in the industry actually qualifies their attendees other than ArcView for, you know, accredited investors on anything other than ticket price. And so what we want to do is we want to know who's in our event environment, make sure that they meet our criteria that creates the most value for everybody else in there, and not just collect an email address and a credit card.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's actually free for retail attendees. I mean, they're the most important, one of the most important groups in this industry. So we want to make sure that the retail attendees, they don't have to pay a dime. They don't have to book a plane ticket. They can engage in this platform. And when we go to our California show, every single one of our brand exhibitors is going to have a show special to create an incentive to buy on the show floor.
Right. And that was another thing I was going to mention is that you can buy on the floor right there.
Yep.
Wonderful. Because again, it is one market. So do you think that there's going to be a finite amount of people that can be on these platforms? You know, you were talking about 500, you know, at what point, you know, is it going to be too big? Like, can you put 30,000 people?
I don't know if there's a definitive answer to that question. You know, what events mean the most to people is, again, is being in the room with the right audience. And so as we go to California, we certainly expect to see 2 to 3 times the audience that we had in Colorado. It's a much bigger market. There's a much bigger value to being able to chat with somebody because of the huge geography that you don't have a chance to interact with on a regular basis. There's almost kind of like 4 or 5 micro markets that you could kind of identify in California, not just northern and southern, but I mean, there's truly, a kind of cornucopia of like individualized, localized markets that are operating as their own kind of business ecosystems. Right. So if we can bring all those people together on the state level, I think that there's going to be a lot of magic, a lot of connections, a lot of networking, and a lot of value.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's amazing what was done here because, you have COVID, they have less staff, a lot of people didn't answer the phone. It was extremely difficult. And as you say, they set up those, the bud tenders, they've got it on lockdown, really. And so to get as many as were there was very impressive because, yeah, they're busy. It's COVID. They're all focused on that. So
it was interesting, and I'm not saying this to pat ourselves on the back, but I mean, we launched basically a new company that had a new brand and a new product using a technology that nobody's used before in the middle of a pandemic that actually was really more about an underlying human resources and financial crisis that these businesses were facing.
Right.
So I give us a solid B for our event in Colorado, but we know what it's going to take to get this to an A+. And again, if we can create value for our customers and our, both the attendees and the retail and the exhibitors and the sponsors, we can create value, we can create a successful business. It's not the other way around that we're going to say, how much money can we make from these people? It's how much can we help them? And by helping their businesses, I know I can create a successful underlying business that will be sustainable.
Now, so your next one's in California, June 23rd through June 25th.
Yep.
And so the target are California retailers, and then it can be national brands though, correct? Or do you just want, because of the licensing and partnering and such?
Yeah, and listen, the brand and retail markets, really live on the state level for now. We know that there will be a time in the future where there is interstate commerce opportunities, and the brands that have, production facilities that are operating really as independent entities in each state will be able to create that economy of scale that they, need to create to really accelerate their business. But, it is targeted on California. The content is going to be around California. The speakers are going to be people that are in the California market and facing the challenges that they have in California so that we can provide actionable intelligence and solutions that businesses can immediately resolve. However, it's like, if you're a qualified brand or retail executive of any state and you want to know what's going on in California, you need to attend.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where we can build those relationships. Like when we go to the Midwest and we go to the Northeast, Illinois, I mean, there's a finite amount of licenses right now. It's growing, and that market's, Michigan as well. And, but there's a lot of companies that have built in Colorado or Washington or California and some of those more mature market states. They're looking to build a national platform. So this is the opportunity to create those interstate connections now as we start to scale out. You brought up the bud tenders. I mean, a lot of people want to try to target the bud tenders as a means for brands to create product knowledge awareness, because the bud tenders are incredibly influential in purchase decisions, as we all know. Somebody said there was 100% turnover in that position at most companies. I don't know if that's actual stat, but it's plausible. There's been a lot of turnover at that level. This is why we want to approach this at a executive level. We want the people that are driving the strategy and that are dealing with those, kind of 30,000 foot challenges, where they're going to want to be in that environment, and they don't look at the retail shop down the street as a competitor. They see them as a co-collaborator in solving the problems that will help everybody's business run better.
Absolutely. absolutely, because we all have the common problems.
Yes.
Everybody does. So yeah, you mentioned Midwest and Northeast. So Midwest will be in August and Northeast in September, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so let's talk about how long do you think it's going to be virtual? Let's say they open it up. Are you going to continue virtual?
To be determined. I don't want to listen. I think it's hard to predict at this point. I mean, there are several events that are scheduled in September and August and September and October and MJBiz in December. In my opinion, I don't think that we're going to see live events come back in 2020.
I don't either.
You know, part of this is going to depend on what type of kind of resurgence of the virus we see as all these economies are opening up. I mean, there's a really tough challenge here of economic damage and despair combined with public health, safety, and people's lives. Yeah. And I hate to say unprecedented because usually that follows with like soft piano music playing in the background. These are unprecedented. Yeah, right. This is a new world order, and you know, good news, bad news. This disrupts everything. So you know, for me as a small startup business, it creates an opportunity. You know, for other brands that are looking to emerge and take advantage of you know market conditions that gives everybody a fair start at you know a fair chance at it, building brand. I think it's an exciting time in that context. Conversely, I think that if anybody is trying to produce an event this calendar year, they're going to see attendance down 70 to 80%. You know, why would you send 5 or 6 people when you can send 1? As an employer, you are exposing yourself to corporate risk by sending somebody to a event at a destination that has a high international, you know, tourist base, right? Like Las Vegas and San Francisco and New York and LA and Orlando, and we're in Chicago, some of these places were most big events. And I'm not just talking about cannabis, I'm talking about across the board.
Oh, for sure.
They're going to struggle with attendance. They're going to, you know, exhibitors are going to be reluctant to sign up for a booth, not sure if the event's going to happen. And especially when a lot of those companies have put down money towards booths at events in the future that has been temporarily seized or, you know, been forced them to roll over to a future spend when they need that cash.
Or they're forcing them to be in the virtual side. So they paid $5 grand, $6 grand, 10 grand for a booth. And they're like, well, we don't give you your money, but you can go to our virtual event. Well, I wouldn't have done it.
Listen, if you're heavy-handed with your customers, it's not going to be a winning strategy long term. You have to be able to understand what your customers' needs are. It's part of why we put together really a phenomenal advisory board of some of the top brands and retailers in the country, because they're our customers and they're the ones who can tell us best what they need, and what we're doing is on the right track.
So let's talk about then the rest of this year. So you are definitely finishing out the year virtual.
At this point, yes. And we've got some other plans beyond the Midwest and the Northeast. I think that keeping our rolling schedule a little bit closer to the chest, because we don't know what's around the corner. And again, you know, if we see that, you know, opening up these state markets, you know, some of the kind of people that are out there, unfortunately, saying that this has been a hoax or a coup by the Democrats, and you know, we've got an election you want to talk about unprecedented times. This fall's election is unprecedented. I mean, our country is in crisis, and we probably have not seen as great a divide of ideology ever in the history since the Civil War. Not to be a doomsdayer.
I feel there's a war coming. I do. I just after what happened in the protesting over Minnesota, but.
And there was a shooting in Kentucky today. Again, it wasn't the police, but you know, it was basically there was a riot going on and 7 people got shot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Didn't even know that. Well, I heard a shot last night at 11. They were protesting from 4 till all through the night here. But the rest of the year, so all the concerts have been closed for 2020. Okay, they're not starting in 2021. So for people to think that they're going to have a large event, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine MJBiz is going to have a December event.
Yeah, and listen, I think we're trying to position our business to be ahead of the curve. And I've already been discussing with some kind of tech entrepreneurs about ways that can be, and listen, they're not solving these problems for me. They're solving them for much bigger clients, i.e. the travel industry, the hotel industry, et cetera, to provide some type of testing mechanism. When somebody actually is exposed to the coronavirus and it's taken a foothold in your body, there's a 72-hour window right now that we know you're not contagious. After that 72 hours, you can now start to expire the virus and expose other people to it. So if we're able to test our attendees, within a 72-hour window of them arriving, having them tested at the show itself, that they are, not contagious, that they do not have the, response, the immuno response to it, we can kind of clear people as, kind of a TSA pre-check of sorts, that people are not actually carrying the virus or in a position to expel the virus and cause contagion.
Well, I just heard that the Wynn, I think, they hired 200 people just to clean. We're going to die of chemicals. I mean, and how much, talking about environment and also cost, how much is it going to cost extra to hire people to clean all the time? I mean, you're touching stuff. Like, how are you going to hand out brochures?
Yeah. Well, guess what? You can download documents to your digital briefcase and save the environment at our virtual trade shows.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, it makes total sense. And it's just so impressive that you had such a small window to do this, really. And you got a lot of great people to show up. And I think that the future events, like you said, you live and learn. I mean, every first event you're tripping over and doing things. So it wasn't any different, just the fact that it was virtual.
Yeah, listen, we're a startup. We have a skeleton crew of people, but I couldn't be prouder of the people I get to work with. Not just my staff, but obviously close friends that also helped us push the boulder up the hill on this one. It was the hardest business launch I've ever had in my life, and it was exhausting at times. My wife and I are, who's my business partner and our chief marketing officer, we were working, 18-hour days, day after day after day, and yelling at our kids to get outside while, exposing them to parental hypocrisy, right?
Right.
It was tough. But like, that's how you gotta work hard. I mean, it's nothing is guaranteed, nothing is granted. And now that we've learned what we need to learn and we can improve the process, we can make the changes, we can service our customers better. We're in for the long haul. We see a big vision and a big opportunity to service the brands and retailers in the space.
So how do they get a hold of MJ Unpacked? If they want to sponsor, they want to attend, how does that happen?
So you can visit our website, www.mj. Does anybody even say www anymore?
Just you, George.
I'm a nerd. The HTTP, no, sorry. It's MJ Unpacked, as you see over my shoulder here, .com. Registration for the California event will be open on June 1st. Again, it is free for qualified attendees that are brand or retail executives. For the brands that are interested in exhibiting, please contact Wendy at Jage Media, Jage media.com. We can offer you a virtual booth experience for less than a banner ad, and you actually get to talk to the people. You get to see what they're looking at. You get to see what they downloaded. You can follow up with them immediately. None of the things you can do with a banner ad for $500. We can reduce our costs massively because our underlying costs are reduced. And we don't think that it's appropriate to overcharge people for something. We'd rather undercharge them.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the problem, or these just keep getting more and more and more and more expensive, and the value's going down and down and down. So
we're charging less and giving you more value.
okay, well, God, this is amazing. I can't wait to see what happens. You know, as this progresses, I'm sure that the next one's going to be better and better and better, and that's how it goes. You learn so much about the tech part and how hard it is. What do you think the hardest part was about the event?
You know, I think it's difficult when you have a new technology platform that people don't understand it yet, right? And this is where you know, we're social people or creatures. We thirst for that social interaction. At least most of us do. It's kind of part of our Maslow's needs hierarchy that, you know, we need to touch and feel and be loved and be accepted. And we have that same kind of needs in our business and professional career, right? Like we want to be in the room with all the people that share the same passion as us.
Right.
And so there's a lot of fulfillment, personal and professional fulfillment that happens at trade shows.
So you have a program of speakers, right? At certain times during the day. But if people can't make those, the content's still up on the platform for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, you were asking about, you know, what was the most difficult part, and it's again, it's teaching people about the platform, but it's also creating that engagement. You know, we saw tremendous engagement. Like I said, we had, you know, less than a 20%, I think it was maybe 15% attrition of people who signed up and actually showed up. And if you're running a webinar, it's usually close to 80%. So, you know, we've created that engagement. The technology was very easy to use and people understood it because it was really kind of a very familiar technology of texting people in the event environment. So, you know, it's getting people to dip their toes in the pool, right? And so once we can get people to understand what we're doing, we've gotten better at our messaging on that. We now have a live event that we just did that we can use content from to show people what we're doing. And again, if they miss the session, they can come back in later and watch it on demand. They can go into the event environment, even if it's after the live hours, which we kept to 3 hours a day. After those live hours, you can go into a virtual booth, and if somebody's not there, there's a little button you can send them an email.
And of course, the social lounge, and then the round table that you could feasibly go in and click on it and be able to see the round table. Then you had some questions that were kind of cool, some trivia about cannabis. That was pretty cool. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And again, I'm just flabbergasted how you did all of this in 6 weeks. I think I would have no hair right now if that was the case. So, but it sounds like you're proud of what you accomplished, and that there was people that definitely got value out of it. I know, because people gave me some feedback on it.
Yeah, thank you for your help, Jen, by the way.
So, but is there anything?
You're a rock star.
I appreciate that, George. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
That's it. You know, onward and online. I mean, we are full steam ahead planning this next event. You know, this is about how do we help lift the industry up. That trade shows are, you know, it's an essential need. Like this is how people build networks, how they do commerce, and that need hasn't gone away. If anything, it's increased. I mean, we have a need to kind of jumpstart our economy. So, you know, we can do that safely through this virtual event platform. And that's really what we want to do, is be a solution provider. Okay,
so who are you looking for? Let's be crystal clear of what you're looking for California, sorry.
Yeah, you know, what we want to see is we want to see the retail attendees show up, purchasing managers, retail directors, managers, C-suite. You know, those are the people we're really looking for engagement. We know that you have an incredibly difficult business model. You have very punitive tax codes. You have changing regulatory structure. You're competing against the illicit market. You have staff turnover. You know, there's some big problems there. We want you to know that this is the environment where you can help find the solutions. We've got great content to help you find those solutions. And obviously your professional network is going to be part of your solution. So those are the people we really want. We love to see the brands. We've got a number of brands already signed on board. We've already doubled the size of our brand participation from Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we'll be pushing out, who's in the show very shortly. Everything really gets turned up to 100 degrees on Monday, depending on when this airs. That might have been yesterday. So on June 1st, you'll see a lot of marketing and ramp up for our California show.
And then will you have the same suppliers that you had here, or are you going to get
some same, some new?
Some new. Okay. And are you trying to do, well, suppliers are usually national, but I noticed that here some of the suppliers were local to Colorado, which was nice, since it is a market event. And then, so it's a free ticket to come for retailers. And then, brands sponsor with their expos, suppliers sponsor with their expos. And then, like you said, the speakers are sponsoring a roundtable event. I'm just so grateful that I got the chance to take a look at this, and I learned some new things, which is always wonderful. And I look forward to, hopefully you'll let me join the Colorado event just so I can spy.
California event, and yes, you can.
That would be wonderful. Well, this is great, and I want to follow up with you later on in the year so you can talk about the progression and what was great and what you're going to do better, just all of those kind of things I would love to see in the future. But it pretty much, to me, I think it's going to be virtual this year. I really don't think they're going to have any big events, but we'll see. Yeah.
The means, the need, it's about delivering on the need and on the solution, not necessarily the platform or the medium that we're delivering it on. So we'll adjust our business strategy as appropriate as we move forward. But for now, this is the best possible solution. And I hope people stay engaged with the virtual platform because of the fact that we are saving the planet in the process. And once this pandemic's over and we still have an existential threat of climate change that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing for me out of this is the environment and the trash. Like I just never thought about that. And there's no trash when I'm sitting here. It's great.
All right.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, as I know you are super busy, and I look forward to California. And hopefully if you're out there and you're a brand and you want to participate in the California market, it is MJUnpacked.com.
We forgot www.
Sorry, www.http:// MJUnpacked.com. You can also find a place for sponsors if you wanted to sponsor. And are you taking applications for speaking, or?
Yeah, we do have an application for speaker. We're just about done finishing up our program for the California show, inviting some speakers. We're going to have a really great program.
Great. I'm excited. Well, thank you so much, George.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the best for the next one.